I gotta say so many good things about the man who's sitting right here in front of me, which I...
Nadia, I'll start with a question for you. This is your feature film debut, and what was it like for you making that transition from theater, but also working with this very powerful cast?
Stuff of dreams. It's been a really great transition, actually. I think that one of the many advantages of having been a theatre director for a long time before moving into film is that I spent a lot of time working with actors and working really closely with actors and how to maintain a performance over weeks and weeks or months and months. And so actually the kind of transition to film felt less scary than you think it does, because it's just working with, in this case, fantastic actors, moving them around the space, trying to figure out the story through physical action. Like, it kind of isn't more complicated than that, because you have this fantastic crew of, and the HODs around you to support everything that's going to happen around that. I mean, did I think that my first film was going to be adapting the work of a literary titan? Not so much. I feel very lucky to obviously get to work on a Walter Mosley story, and also to have a script out there where it really can be as simple as you send a script to Corey Hawkins, you send a script to Willem Dafoe, and they read it and they say, yeah, because this is an amazing story, and you can sort of see the actor challenges within it that are still interesting. I think that was a real focus for me of, not only was I like, can I cast the best actors, but can I cast the actors to whom they still feel like this is a challenge for them, because the whole film is a first-time challenge for me. And actually I think we really had that. It felt like everybody was doing something kind of separately difficult to what everybody else was doing. And one day Willem might be having to support Corey through some very complicated piece that Corey's doing. The next day it's kind of on Willem, or Anna's kind of like flitting in and going, what's happening now? Yeah. So actually it felt like a kind of lovely egalitarian process, actually.
And then, Corey, really all of Willem's scenes are just with you, this series of escalating sort of conversations.
Sorry. I don't have anything with you. What's that about?
She almost opened the door to me.
But tell me about that. What was it like, sort of going just toe-to-toe with Willem throughout the film?
Oh, man. I gotta say so many good things about the man who's sitting right here in front of me, which I... which I am happy to do, because he's obviously a titan in this industry, but he leads with so much grace, and he comes with so much this sort of willingness to play, and the willingness to, for someone who's done as much, as many great films and theater as he has, to be able to have that shared language and to do it without ego is such a beautiful thing, because I would literally be sitting opposite him and just be in awe, and like Nadia's like, Corey, like, oh yeah.
He's like, oh, did you know I'm in the scene with Willem Dafoe?
I literally
but listen, I'm gonna leave. But I am your mirror. I mean, this guy has the stuff, and it's hung on him. The film is really hung on him, and so he's well prepared. He has the chops, but he's also very loose, and not precious. So it was really fun to work with him, and we had great material and pretty direct material. I mean, stuff where we're really dealing with each other, because we both characters have, to skip to the chase, secrets to be revealed, and that's always interesting for when two actors have to work together when they're really at cross purposes.
I think also it was really fun because we rehearsed separately. So I went and rehearsed with Willem and rehearsed with Corey separately. So they actually, they'd literally spoken to each other before, but they sort of met as characters for the first time on set. And we've shot all of Willem's scenes in right chronological order. So actually it sort of felt like we were like falling through this relationship, and kind of Willem's getting more haggard and time is passing. Do you know what I mean? Like it felt very organic, actually.
And then, Anna, one film that this film really reminded me of was Nikki Atajusu's Nanny, which of course you're also in. And I'm wondering, did you see a connection between the two films, and do you find yourself naturally drawn to stories that seem to be drawing from folklore?
I think they're drawn to me. I am also drawn to them. But I think these stories that are unpacking generational ancestral pain for some reason seemed to really be drawn to me. But yeah, there are a lot of parallels in both. I think both explore again African American history and the ways that it's showing up now in in his life and in Aisha's life and Nanny as well, in really traumatizing, painful, confronting ways. What I love about Narcissus though is she brings the light into that for him, and she shows him that there's another way to be at odds with this, right? He's been in so much turmoil and he's so lost when we meet him, and Narcissus kind of shows him a way forward through what he's already always had and didn't realize. So.
I think also in many ways, like Willem's character and Anna's character is sort of oppositional forces over Corey. Like I think in a way they sort of represent like two ideological standpoints that he could pick. Neither is perfect, and I think probably it's not a spoiler to say by the end of the film he sort of figures out a third path. Because actually I think a lot of it is about developing your own kind of ideas about the world and actually trying to forge your own understanding, which might go against the grain. So in a way they're both kind of these like ideological titans in his life, just like very, very different ideas of how the world works, what are the kind of controlling forces in the universe. And Charles has just got to figure out his own choices.
Yeah. And because Willem, to that end, at one point in the film, to sort of provoke Corey's character, use a slur, the N-word, and I'm curious, did you have any reservations about saying that on film, and was it something that you had a conversation with Nadia about at all?
No, that's part of the whole pool of things that we're talking about. And yeah, no, I didn't.
Was that a conversation for you at all, Nadia?
No, not really. I mean, I think that if you read the novel, and there is a confrontation with ideas. That's what the whole thing's about.
Yeah, it has a lot to how we're seen and what we're inheriting, and there's a lot to talk about. Are we the product of what has come before us? And then there's other ideas introduced, like my character at one point, and I don't want to get into any spoilers, kind of says, hey, listen, whether I'm here or not, the world's going to spin this way, and I'm kind of practical in how I choose things, and that becomes his way to kind of, there's a lot of pointing at why things are the way they are and how people cop to them or not. That's all in the mix. So using something like the N-word, that's the conversation we're having.
It's the language, but underneath that.
You don't use the W word underneath or the H word. Try me.
Right. Because Nadia, the film really is grappling with the idea of history, how we process history and use it to move forward. And what does it mean to you to be making this story now at a moment when history, and in particular African American history, is becoming very politicized and in some ways erased itself?
I think when I first came to the novel, I'm from Africa, I'm from Sudan, I'm born and raised. I think what I saw actually was the gap between my understanding of a history and an African American understanding of that history. And actually I think the film kind of resides in that distance of sort of saying there is one way for an African American to understand the tide of history that brought them to America and all those other things, but actually how much of that in our day-to-day lives are we using, what's useful, what isn't useful, self-defining, like when does that become a powerful tool or something that actually is used to put you down? So I think that, and the film is set in the 1990s, which is obviously a very specific moment in African American history, but it was also a very specific moment in African history, and I specifically set the film in 1994 because I wanted to contrast everything that was happening in Charles's life and discovering his own connection to Africa, potentially through his ancestors, and the Rwandan genocide, which to me as an African growing up in Africa in the 1990s felt in many ways like the forgotten genocide. And actually I really wanted to sort of bring that back because obviously it's a very complicated war, right? Like, if you look at it one way, it seems like a load of black people just killing each other. Look at it another way, it's the legacy of colonialism and Belgian colonialism. So I sort of feel like the whole story is residing in that space of history is just a series of ideas that one person writes down and gets to dictate, this is how it happened, but actually that's not true at all.
And I would just add, it's also beautiful and sort of freeing to be able to tell this kind of story that's centered in Blackness and centered in this particular historic community in Sag Harbor. These people exist, they have lives that deserve to be told, their stories, and they're wrestling with the issues that these characters are wrestling with every day. Maybe not to the extent that Charles is wrestling with them, but I think those stories, the stories that you were talking about earlier, your previous film as well, like all of these things are a part of the canon and a part of that dialogue and that diaspora, that bigger diaspora of Black storytelling, if you even call it storytelling, you know. And I think it's as specific as it is, it's sort of universal in remembering the choice to either carry your history or try to be unburdened by your history. I think there's a lot in there that gets explored and maybe not necessarily answered, and that's the joy of being of doing this as artists. I think, you know, for all of us.
Anna, did you want to add anything to that?
No, it's so beautifully said. What can I say? What can I say? No, I'm really moved by that. It's I'm also African. I was born and raised in Senegal, and so for me, growing up in the States, there was always this. I think I spoke to you once about this because Corey and I know each other way back. But you know, African Americans that are born and raised here, the difference and the kind of relationship sometimes that can be a bit friction between Africans that are coming here and, you know.
It's a tricky thing to wrestle with.
It's like,
because also that relation to there's a disconnect, I think, for some African Americans who are maybe descendants of, you know, enslaved people, or, you know, and so but Charles is wrestling not only with that, but just that trauma of just losing your parents, your friends, you're being sort of stuck in a rut, and wrestling with good and evil. It's so much, but it's so simple at this. You know.
I think the film, for me, I'm very interested in notions of individual versus collective suffering. Like, I think that actually probably the majority of storytelling is about an individual suffering, because we find that something we can understand. We can see his figure and see that he's a piteous figure, but actually there is something about when suffering becomes so large that we begin to block it out, because actually we cannot conceive of 10,000 people being murdered, 100,000 people, 1 million people being murdered, which is obviously what happened in Rwanda. And actually I think that there's something very interesting about Charles as he comes into the world and understands the kind of absolute universe of cruelty and suffering that has existed throughout history, that it is sort of too much. It kind of shorts him out slightly, because in some ways, you know, Sag Harbor is a wonderful place. It's a place where Black people have always been free, they've taken their leisure, they've owned land. But it is also an enclave of, you know, it's a very closed off place in that way. And actually, if you sort of connect out to the sort of larger Black experience, you have to take in all the pain and suffering that comes with, unfortunately.
And then, Willem, I want to ask you, you had, I think it was 2 films that just premiered in Venice. You had one in Locarno, you have this film now in Toronto. You seem like you're in a very prolific time in your career. Do you find that the decisions you're making of what projects you want to make, has it changed for you? Like, what for you, why is it that you've been so booked and busy recently?
Well, you know, just opportunities have arrived, and you know, I never work just to work, but I'm working a lot because there have been opportunities out there. I think I planted a seed by mixing up the films that I do, and that gives me a wider selection of types of projects. So I never quite get jammed, you know? Because if I don't find interesting things to do in this arena, I'll find interesting things to do in that arena. And then there's also theater on top of that. I mean, so the thing to do is to remain engaged and not limit yourself. So in this period, it's a good period. I found interesting things to do. And you know, that may go away, it may come again, you know, who knows, who knows.